Well, the first question, the answer's in the numbers most people have seen. Exports are going up dramatically. Fixed asset investments going up dramatically. These have been the mainstays of China's growth in the past, and they continue to be today. As to the accuracy of the numbers, that's a very interesting question. They're collected in China bottom up. The provinces report their GDP numbers to the National Bureau of Statistics. And the NBS has limited ability to control the quality of these numbers.
And we should point out, for a lot of people, we see China as just one big thing. China. It is many different economies, right? More than one for sure.
Oh, yes, certainly there are three distinct economies along the coast, Bohai Bay region, Beijing, and so forth, the Yangtze River Basin, Shanghai, and then the Pearl River Delta, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. And then there's the inland economies of Sichuan province, and there are economies even further inland. So minimum, there are four separate economies in China.
So they are, in essence, competing with each other within their national structure because they are reporting these numbers. And there is a quota system. A lot of people don't realize this, and you've reported this in your research. There is a quota system for reporting economic growth in these regions, is there not?
Well, understand that provincial governors aren't elected in China. They're appointed by the party, by the central government. And what do they look like? What do they look at when they're considering folks for advancement in the system? First and foremost, they look at GDP, provincial GDP. So there are very strong incentives to grow provincial GDP, and these incentives have the expected consequences.
Okay, so if there is an incentive program to have higher numbers, it's not unlike test scores in U.S. schools. If there's an incentive to have higher test scores, sometimes and in some schools, you may see people inflate those numbers or do things that help inflate the numbers but don't necessarily help the children learn. Are we seeing something similar happen in China? Is this system creating a sustainable economy in China?
Well, I can't prove that people are making the numbers by any means possible, but again, anytime you have quotas, this is likely. Is this sustainable? That's a very interesting question. It's a bit of a perpetual motion machine right now. The Chinese currency is a little bit undervalued, maybe not terrifically undervalued, but it's a little bit undervalued. And as a consequence, Chinese goods remain at the low end of the price spectrum. So a lot of investment goes there, manufacturing at low cost occurs, exports occur, money comes back into China. But there's another piece of this. The RMB is non-convertible. Dollars...
And the RMB, we should point out.
The Chinese renminbi, the Chinese currency, the yuan. It's non-convertible. So dollars come into China or other foreign currencies. They're immediately bought by the central bank, and people are paid in local currency, in RMB. So the money supply in China just goes up and up and up.
And for folks watching at home say, okay, well, what's so bad about that? What's that lead to?
Well, it leads to a couple of things. First, you've noticed they're experiencing some inflation. But secondly, since the money, the local money is trapped in China, it has to be invested in China. And there are many studies showing that returns on investment in China are much lower than abroad. So you have all of this inefficient investment, mainly into factories that, guess what, manufacture goods for export. The more export, the more cash comes into China, the more RMB circulating in China, the more factories, the more export. The perpetual motion machine.
Very interesting. Our last 30 seconds, you also have watched reform in this country.
Yes.
When will we see a change in that perpetual motion as you described? When can we see that investment dollars start to go outside of China?
Well, I don't know when, because the Chinese government has very good reason for keeping the currency non-convertible. They saw what happened in 1997 in Indonesia, in Thailand, when at the first sign of bad news, all the currency left the country and these countries were plunged into economic crisis.
So there is not necessarily the incentive to make that move right off the bat. So it is going to be a situation that continues for a while. Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your expertise in this subject. Marshall Meyer is a professor of management and sociology at University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. And a reminder, I want to hear from you. If you have a question, you can call or email on the web. You find us at cna.tv, and our voicemail box is 1-877-862-9374.